We found that not everyone can even name all 7 wonders. Try an experiment. Pause the video right now and see how many you can list. In our experience, most people stop at 3 or 4. That's why we decided to make this short video. Not just so you'll know their names, but so you'll get a quick overview of the history behind each wonder. After all, most of them are long gone, and some may not have even existed at all. So, get comfortable. Over the next few minutes, we'll take you through the story of the 7 great wonders of the world. Let's start with how the concept of wonders even began. It's obvious that from the earliest times, our distant ancestors would build a giant structure and immediately call it a wonder. But the actual tradition of making lists of wonders took shape with the ancient Greeks. And it wasn't just about buildings. In ancient Greek philosophy and rhetoric, there was an entire genre dedicated to making lists of the greatest orators, kings, generals, and so on. The wonders of the world became a branch of that genre. It's believed that Herodotus was one of the first to classify wonders. In the 5th century BC, he named 3, but none of them made it into the classic list. The number 7 only became standard for the Greeks around the 3rd century BC. And it wasn't random. 7 was the sacred number of Apollo, considered perfect and representing the idea of a complete list. In fact, the very first official list is often credited to a poem by Antipater, either of Thessalonica or Sidon, depending on the source. That poem is the first to mention 7 wonders, and the list looks a lot like the classic one. The walls of Babylon, the Hanging Gardens, the Pyramids, the Colossus of Helios, the Mausoleum of Mausolus, the Temple of Artemis, and Olympus. Later, Greek orators kept tweaking and changing the list. At different times, it included the Library of Alexandria, the Altar of Zeus, the Palace of Cyrus, Solomon's Temple, the Tower of Babel, and even Noah's Ark. The final classic list is thought to have taken shape more or less during the time of Alexander the Great, who fittingly built a ton of stuff himself and created the empire that launched the Hellenistic era. Over the centuries, historians kept trying to change the list, tossing in things like the Colosseum or the Great Wall of China. In 2007, they even ran a global contest for new wonders of the world. But, as you probably know, the original Hellenistic 7 have never really been dethroned in terms of popularity. So those are the ones we'll cover today, starting with the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't built by Alexander himself. The lighthouse was a product of the Hellenistic Age, finished during the reign of Ptolemy II in Alexandria around 279 BC. This was the only wonder with a practical function. As you might guess, the Lighthouse of Alexandria served as an actual lighthouse, continuing Alexander's plan to make the city a major trade hub. It was truly impressive, holding the title of tallest man-made structure on Earth for a long time. Standing 120 to 150 meters tall, it guided sailors with a huge fire at its peak, visible from 50 kilometers away. Day and night, mules hauled firewood up to keep the beacon burning. The lighthouse's importance can't be overstated. For one thing, it's believed that the first calculation of Earth's radius was done using the lighthouse. At least that's what modern scientists say. It also doubled as a fortress. Julius Caesar himself wrote that only by seizing control of the lighthouse in Pharos Island was he able to defeat Ptolemy Thynthene's army. The Lighthouse of Alexandria stood for more than 1,000 years, making it one of the longest-lasting wonders. It might have survived to this day, but when the Arab world took over, Alexandria and Pharos went into decline. The lighthouse, which had already survived several massive earthquakes, wasn't maintained anymore. After a major earthquake in 956, the fallen Greek statue atop it was replaced with an Islamic dome. Then, in 1303, another earthquake did even more damage, nearly destroying it. The last remains of the lighthouse were finally used by the Egyptian Sultan Qaitbay to build a fortress in 1480. Today, the underwater ruins of ancient Alexandria and Pharos are being considered for a submarine museum, so there's no doubt the lighthouse really existed. The same can't be said for the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the most debated wonders. It's partly a product of Alexander's legacy too, since one of his successors, Demetrius, laid siege to Rhodes for a year. He failed, and around 290 BC, the people of Rhodes celebrated their victory by building a statue. The Rhodes School of Sculpture was famous, and you probably know what happened next. A giant statue over 30 meters tall was built in 12 years. But most of the Colossus was actually made of clay. The core was iron, with bronze plates for stability and shine. It was beautiful, but about 50 years later, an earthquake brought it down. Even so, the ruined statue lay on the ground for nearly 1,000 years, until in 653 AD, Arab conquerors took over Rhodes and sold the fragments as scrap. The next wonder is the Mausoleum of Mausolus. The word mausoleum comes from his name because the building created for his tomb was so extraordinary. Built for a Persian ruler by Greek sculptors, this marvel stood 45 meters high. Interestingly, Mausolus died 2 years before construction started. It was commissioned by his loving wife, but she didn't live to see it finished either. In the end, both their ashes were placed in the unfinished mausoleum. But the work was completed because by then, the craftsmen saw it as much more than a ruler's tomb. It had become a great architectural achievement. And it was. The mausoleum stood for more than 1,000 years, only destroyed by a series of earthquakes in the 15th century. The ruins were taken apart by the Knights Hospitaller to build the Castle of St. Peter, which was later captured by the Ottomans and renamed Bodrum. The castle still stands in the city of Bodrum, and you can see pieces of the original mausoleum inside today. Our next stop, the Temple of Artemis. It's legendary partly because it went through several reincarnations. The first temple dated back to the Bronze Age and was a place of worship. The Greeks believed it was built by the Amazons, but that version was destroyed by a flood. In 550 BC, they began building the most famous version. Construction took 200 years and finished around 380 BC. Remember that poet I mentioned earlier? He said that compared to the Temple of Artemis, even the pyramids looked unimpressive. The roof was held up by 127 columns. Legend says each was a gift from a ruler somewhere in the world. It was as long as a football field, almost as wide, and stood about 20 meters tall. It's one of the only wonders specifically designed to withstand earthquakes. Ironically, that's not what destroyed it. The first to do that was Herostratus, who burned it down to become famous. You probably know that story, but there's another legend that on the very day of the fire, Alexander the Great was born, and the Greeks joked that Artemis was busy with his birth and neglected her temple. As an adult, Alexander started rebuilding the temple, making it even grander. The third temple was like a mini-city with its own administration, warehouses, and finances. But the Christians didn't care for any of that. And when the region fell under the late Roman Empire in the early to mid-5th century AD, the temple was closed for good. Any mention of it was erased as blasphemous, and as usual, the materials were hauled off elsewhere. It's said that Hagia Sophia was partly built from its columns, and statues and other treasures were shipped off to Constantinople. Today, all that remains at Ephesus is a single, lonely column. But the next wonder was even less lucky, the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Unsurprisingly, it's tied to the Olympic Games. In the 5th century BC, the Greeks decided to honor the god of the games by building a temple. By 456 BC, the temple was finished, the largest in the world at that time. 22 meters high, 27 meters wide, and 64 meters long. But the main highlight wasn't the temple itself, but the statue of Zeus they built for it. The sculptor Phidias used 200 kilograms of gold and top-grade ivory to create the god's body. The result was said to be stunningly detailed and awe-inspiring. It was unveiled in 435 BC, and about 200 years later, an earthquake severely damaged it. Supposedly, the statue was restored, and it's believed that by the early 5th century AD, it was still intact. Although by then, Christians and thieves had looted most of the temple. There are two theories about its ultimate fate. One says it was moved to Constantinople and burned in the Palace of Laussos in 475 AD. The other is simpler, that the statue burned along with the temple in a fire in 426, though that's doubtful since little of the temple remained by then. Now let's talk about the two most famous wonders everyone knows. First, the Hanging Gardens. Their very existence is a big question. Unlike the other wonders, excavations have never confirmed them. Most accounts come from Greeks and Romans, who loved to embellish stories and lived long after the gardens were destroyed. Even the story of their construction is complicated. Most sources agree that they were built by the legendary Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar for his wife in the 6th century BC. But some say they were created by the Assyrian queen Semiramis. Her name even became synonymous with the gardens. Descriptions claim the gardens were a multi-level cascade of grapevines, trees, and shrubs, turning an ordinary palace into a green mountain. Supposedly, the gardens were destroyed by Persian invaders in the 1st century BC, but again, there's no real proof they ever existed. Honestly, it's better to just go to Egypt to see the only wonder that's still around today, the legendary Pyramids of Giza. The largest, the Pyramid of Khufu, is still breathtaking today. Built between the 26th and 23rd centuries BC, its marble casing was stolen over the centuries, but you can still see the original design. Now you know the stories behind the other wonders, wonders that, even after thousands of years, no new list has managed to surpass. So far, at least. If you enjoy stories like this, give the video a like and subscribe. It really helps me make more content for you. And let me know in the comments which wonder you'd most like to see rebuilt today. See you next time!